Good evening. Tonight our topic is the events here which happened over the weekend in Syria. And this hasn't been a topic on my channel, but I thought I'm gonna put some information or my thoughts out on what I think is going to be happening based on the information I received today throughout the day from various channels and outlets from all across the world, basically. And that gave me a very interesting idea. So I did a lot of reading, a lot of listening, a lot of watching on Sunday today. And I wanted to kind of just formulate this here into a condensed version of this for those people who would like to get a little bit more information, who have not been able to watch all of this stuff. Now, of course, we know, depending on from which country the information comes, it may be more or less propaganda. There may be some truth to it. There may not be truth to it. And I will kind of dissect this a little bit without trying to get you into an overload. Now, we know that Assad is now apparently in Moscow, in Russia. He has gotten political asylum there. And the first question, of course, comes to mind is why did Russia, or the Russian Federation, the Russian armed forces there, and Iran, who are his allies, or his closest allies, his supporters, did not support him in suppressing that rebellion they had, which led to the overthrow of his government. And of course, neither side has said anything. There's a lot of speculation out there why Iran didn't do it, or why Russia especially didn't do it because of Ukraine and this, that. It's all speculation. At this point, we do not know the exact reasons of why they did not intervene on Assad's behalf. The fact is, they didn't. The Turkish government supported, now let me see if I get this now right, this is the Syrian Free Army, which was renamed to the Syrian Army something, which is the larger force, and that force is now fighting, from the understanding I have, again in the northern part against the Kurdish movement up there, which is supported by the United States. And throughout the day, information appeared here in the United States that the leader of that Kurdish group there of people in northern Syria is invited, or was invited by the Trump administration with two other high-ranking Kurdish, people there to attend the inauguration, which is on January 20th. So I got it mixed up the other day, 20th, 21st, I couldn't remember. It's the 20th. And so this is kind of now interesting to see how this is going to further develop. The rebels, the HTS, I believe, let me try to decipher that. That group of resistance fighters, or whatever you may want to call them, who basically led the rebellion and are currently sort of in charge of Syria. HTS, their leader is a ex-Al-Qaeda member, and we don't know yet what to make out of this, to see if their words are just, and if the actions will match of what they're saying, whether they have moderated or not, because this is one big hotbed. Now, the assessment today in the Pravda, and again, the Pravda has online two sections, Russian, or they do articles for the Russian population or Russian readership who does not speak English. So they're writing one thing in Russian, and they may write under the same topic something else on their English version. I haven't checked the German version or any other languages they may offer. I usually look at the English version just to say what they're telling their English-capable viewers to read, or what they're telling them. But the primary objective for me is when I check this, I check the information presented to the Russian public who does not speak English, because that's what they basically going to learn if they're reading this stuff. And this is going to be similar in the entire media system, what is put out there. And the Pravda wrote in that Russian article today that the not the Soviet Union, but Russia kind of, was a little bit, looked weak, or, didn't rise up to the occasion and that sort of stuff. So because they didn't intervene and they didn't strong arm this whole thing down into the ground and everything else. And they made an interesting conclusion or furtherance out of it, which I think is worthwhile, at least taking into consideration. May not turn out that way, but there is a possibility for this. And they said that the Turkish army supported the Syrian National Army, SNA, I think that's what they're called now. It was the Free Army first, and they changed it to the Syrian National Army, which is not Assad's army. It is the group which was supported by Turkey, with military aid and training and that sort of stuff. And these are the people who are going after the Kurds. And what they're expecting is that it could lead to a major turmoil in Turkey with their Kurdish population and the Kurds in northern Iraq, that this is going to have a possibility that may even get Turkey to fall apart at the seams because of the support of the Kurdish political organizations there, which came out of the KPP, I think that's what that was called, which was supported by the United States. And I don't know what Trump is going to do, but we will have to wait. There's a possibility there. And what they're anticipating is that that whole turmoil, once this is starting to develop, and I will get to that here in a minute a little bit further, is that this will cause a refugee stream back into Europe of Turkish people and of Kurdish people who are going to trying to escape the madness. Of course, Greece is the first European country they're going to reach, right over the Bosporus, over the Strait of Bosporus. And I almost said it's in Istanbul now, but so they're going to go probably over there. So Bulgaria, Albania, Greece, they're going to get a brunt of the refugees. The further problem is in this entire region, which they call the Levant, that this is usually controlled by clans, Normand-type clans who live in this deserted land, basically, back there. And there's various different tribes and clans, and they have fought for a long time against each other, and they kind of stopped, sort of, or for the better part, when the whole area, the Levant over there, was under the control of the Ottoman Empire back then. And, I was looking for the word Constantinople. I should have said Constantinople, because it's kind of what that looks like. So we will see. So this is going to be interesting to see and how this is going to develop. And we hope, of course, for the best in this. At the moment, of course, the sheer joy and happiness of this Assad thing being gone, is going to be predominant. But in the days coming, the anger of the regular population who had to endure Assad's family there for 50 years or something like this since 1971, since that coup came over, they took over, or Assad's father took over. That is going to have some ramifications. These people are going to be angry. They're going to be disgruntled. I watched several videos coming out of there. For one is, there's currently a operation in place by the White Helmets, which is a semi-quasi-military group within that Syrian rebel structure, so to speak, in that HTS. And their primary goal is to rescue all the prisoners out of this terrible prison there, that military prison from Assad. And they have gotten down, because it is an underground bunker system, basically, what they have encountered there. And the guards from Assad, they left overnight the prison, and they took the codes for these doors, for these gates, with them. So this is extremely difficult, and they shut off the ventilation into these low-lying basements. And you can see on the camera that there's people in these cells, quite a few of them. These are cells, probably they house 50, 25, 50, 100 prisoners in each cell. So they're heavily crowded, and if there's no ventilation, these people are going to suffocate. So they were able to release the prisoners on the ground level fairly easy, because the doors were not fully, or is not as mechanically interlocked as what they have been finding there in the basement. So this whole story is going to work its way through the Arab community, and in Syria, this is going to cause a lot of anger and resentments. This is all going to come up. There's no question about it. If you have a country that repressed, and the estimates from the White Helmets is that they're anticipating there could be as many as 100,000 people in these underground prison system. We don't know yet how many. We will see what they're going to do with the Assad people, the government people who worked for Assad, and the military people from Assad's army, and these prison guards. A mob already went in, and they basically burned down the building in Damascus, which was the headquarters for their secret police. And some citizens went in, and they broke into the central bank in Damascus, the Syrian central bank, and they started to carry out boxes of money. But interestingly enough, the HTS soldiers, which are still armed, intervened and forced these people to drop these boxes in the courtyard of the central bank, and they monitored this. So the people were able to get into other office buildings, to vent their anger and their frustration, but they were not allowed to steal any money from the Syrian central bank, basically. So that indicates that the HTS is going to maintain the government with the financial system as it is in place at the moment, with the currency. Otherwise, they would have not cared about the money thing. They would have let them ransack the central bank as well. So these actions we're seeing now is pretty clear, and we will have to see what they're going to do. Are they going to do executions, mass executions of Assad, conform government workers and employees of that government system, or are they going to be tolerant and forgiving? We have no clue at this point. This can get pretty ugly, these kind of things, when this anger vents. If you get a real angry mob going with no law enforcement really in place, where the HTS, the soldiers, are sort of a military police, so to speak. So they have not only to fight, but also to police the system. And then the question is, can they take over these prisons? Because if they have to arrest other people who disobey now their orders, they will probably wind up arresting these people. Then the question, so these are all questions which are going to come up here after the first euphoria of Assad leaving the nation or the country has, when the reality starts to sink in. The population is deprived. They have been deprived for a long time. They have a lot of grievances they need to work through and went out. We remember the horrible and horrific gas attacks by Assad's military with the help of the Russian Federation. When was it, 2014, 2016, somewhere around there. These terrible pictures which went around. So today, one of the first actions the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, and the US military did today is they took out all ammunition storage facilities, airports, military airports. They destroyed basically everything and anything what had to do with weapons, explosives, gas or chemical weapons, and so far and so on, what belonged to Assad, that the rebels couldn't get this, for one. They didn't want them to get a hold of this kind of stuff. They didn't want to get the Hamas people, to have access to this. So this was that there were explosions everywhere. There were huge fires and magnificent explosions all throughout Syria when all of this was destroyed in multiple air raids by the U.S. Air Force and whatever forces they had, and the IDF. They left nothing to chance. So was the research center they had in Damascus, which was staffed by Iranian scientists. All of the stuff is gone. This was all blown up as soon as it was clear that Assad was leaving or had left. Everything went into emotion, and they leveled everything. And what they haven't, they probably will in the next couple of days. There's more to come. The U.S. also targeted several of the ISIS or ISIL, Al-Qaeda type of people throughout Syria. They were all taken out and basically finished off. There was no one spared. This went very quickly in a very radical movement. Now the entire situation has left us now in a vacuum. Basically, this is what we're looking at. For one is the Hamas people have no more access to weapons out of the Iran, so they cannot be resupplied, because that was the route from Iran through basically Syria into the Hamas territories over there in the Gaza Strip. And that was what caused the problems. That is now gone. So this is the Hamas is basically completely isolated now. They're gone. Assad is gone. And now the Iranians are basically diminished. The Iran is diminished. They still have their capabilities of whatever they have, but they have no more allies in this area. The Russians said, the official Russian version was, they did not want to support Assad because his state, his country, or his military was weak. And this is what Iran Foreign Ministry confirmed this morning or later today, was that the Assad himself was completely bamboozled on how his military failed. And there were steps he took. He had arrested a lot of officers and military personnel in the last 2 or 3 years to stem corruption within the military machine he had over there. That depleted his soldiers and demoralized them. And then I think sometimes last week he said they're going to get a 50% pay raise. But by that time, this was all said and done. So he had basically destructed his own apparatus. For whatever reason he did that, that was ultimately the outcome. And that's why they most likely surrendered. Again, this is all speculative. The only thing we can go by really is what officially came out of Moscow, was that the official version was that they didn't want to support a weak ally, in this case Assad. So rather than helping him, they gave him political asylum. You can take this however you want, but this is what they have basically presented. We can speculate this now. On a further notice, what this could have for an impact is on the relations now with Turkey. So if Turkey is going to get pressured by NATO, because it is a NATO member, to back off from the Kurdish people in northern Syria, which they don't probably want to do because that is one of their biggest hot button issues they got. They had for a long time, since the 1970s, since the Kurdish party, that the KPP, ever emerged, and that was I don't know how far to the left they are, but they are to the left, and none of the stuff really fits. In Syria it was so and so because Syria also, his father came out of the Ba'ath Party, which was a nationalist socialist movement that was in Iraq primarily. You had Saddam Hussein, who was part of that Ba'ath Party, but that had fallen apart. And it was one of these grand muftis in Iraq, I believe, many, many decades ago, who was also close ally with Himmler. Hitler didn't think too much of the people from the Middle East, but it was Himmler who was fascinated there too. And of course, being both organizations, national and socialist movements, and anti-Semitic in their core, basically, made them come closer together, even though that the Nazis thought of people from the Middle East as inferior people. Of course, anything what was not Aryan was basically inferior to them. But yet then, if you have a nationalist socialist movement and you're anti-Semitic, you kind of can work with these people. It's insane. This whole Nazi thing was absolutely insanity. That no person with their faculty working properly could follow this kind of logic the Nazis implemented in every way, form or shape of what they did and how they did it. It's unbelievable that people even could vote for this, but it is, as so many times as we don't vote for a person, we vote for a idea or a particular sentiment at that time when the, votes happening. So at that time it fell in because it was the big collapse there on Wall Street, which had preceded and all of that stuff, and people were suffering and the unemployment was high. So we blamed the Jewish bankers for it, and then everything will fall into place. And that is sort of how Adolf Hitler and the Nazis came into power in 1932-33. That's basically how that was. And similarly, this is what happened in the Middle East after World War II. Syria itself had a national assembly and they had a democratic election there, and the Ba'ath Party was one part of it, just to give you some background. And they then basically staged a coup in the early 1960s, and then they had a second coup, which kind of failed. And in the third coup, Assad's father came into power and they started to rule. And this was around 1969, 1971 in that time frame. And this was also the same time when Saddam Hussein came in. The CIA was involved in these kind of coups at that time, especially in Iraq rather than in Syria. And so this was all then, from a democratic view, it was looked at in the late or in the 1960s that these totalitarian regimes, out of interest for the United States and the Soviet Union at that time, were better to stabilize or control the entire Middle East, and that evolved into this, what we have today. This is all a direct result out of the end of World War II, the way World War II ended, and then the entire transition after World War II and the separation in East and West between the two political belief systems or economic belief systems besides that. So at this point, we can speculate a lot, we can think a lot, but we will see. I think the most important thing right now to remember is that Turkey is going to be a critical role in this. And I do not know on how divided Turkey is at the moment, but I also believe when you read things what come out of Russia is the Russian people, the leadership there, they're not necessarily stupid people. Some of the smartest people have come from Russia. So we have to always be on the look and listen to what they're saying, because a lot of times they had the history right and we didn't. In many ways, that doesn't mean that they're always right, neither are we always wrong, for that matter, but it is always good to get multiple opinions And then you can see on how this is going to develop. Someone is going to be right in this picture, which is going to come out of this. And then this will determine the entire Middle East, and it will also impact the entire Ukraine-Russian war at this point. And the reason for this being is, let's just say, I want to get this one thought further, is the rebels, the HTS, which consists of former Al-Qaeda people, gets a country established under their rule. And they're starting to foster some kind of state terrorism again. And that state terrorism is directed towards Russia because the Russians attacked these people. Then Putin, or the Russia, is going to have a bigger problem with HTS, Al-Qaeda, and all these people than the United States, because we did not, or the United States or Europe did not bomb the Syrian people with chemical weapons or attack them to begin with, suppress them. So we have to look at this as well. That will put Russia into a very difficult situation, because he then has they have to deal then with these type of insurgencies, however they may look and however brutal that may get. And that is going to divert the attention back away from the Ukrainian situation. So he's going to have a multitude of issues there to deal with in various different parts of the country. And even though Russia is a very strong country and they're getting their industrial military complex situated, this could strain their resources. And right now, is like I said, is we really don't know why Russia did not intervene here in the last week. We don't know. We may know one day, but we don't know at this point. There was a reason for this. And the reason, whatever they decided, the decision was made not to intervene. And they must have looked at this as a greater benefit to Russia not intervening than doing something. Whatever their assessment and their intelligence they have of that region provided to them, that's how they came basically to that conclusion not to intervene. I believe countries or leaders of countries like Putin, they think foremost of what's good for them, for their political cause or for their country. First, usually it's selfish. First for the political thing, for their own stability or enrichment or what have you. Even though it looks weak at the moment, in the long run it could turn out the better decision. Only time will tell of why they did not intervene. The same goes for Iran. The Iranians could have intervened. They could have, sent weapons or fired missiles and that sort of stuff into the army. But they also did not do that. And here too, there must have been a coordination between Russia and Iran not to intervene, let the Turkish government get involved, let the United States do what they did today and the IDF do what they did today, so they're kind of involved at the moment, and they stayed out of it. So there is some logic behind this, and I could not tie these pieces together. It's like a chess game we're playing when you move with your chess figures and you're trying to protect the king at all costs. And in this case, Assad was let go of. He will live a pretty good life, I'm sure, in Moscow. It may be a lot colder than in Damascus, but he will be there. Then, of course, the West is probably going to try to get into Den Haag, into the war crimes tribunal thing that they got. And but I don't think that Russia is going to send them there. Well, anyway, this is all the thoughts. I hope you liked this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And I will be back the next time we will see, maybe sooner than later, who knows how things are going to develop. I also got a beard, and this is pure laziness to shave. So I guess tomorrow I'm going to stand in front of the mirror and go over with the machine and then go back to normal. With that, you have a great evening.